I was stirring the soup when my daughter-in-law snatched the pot right out of my hands. "Who cooks like that?" "You're completely useless," Vanessa screamed with that voice I had learned to fear more than silence. My son, Daniel, was 10 feet away, sunken into that oversized armchair I bought when he still called me Mommy. He turned up the volume on the television. He pretended not to hear, just like always. The boiling liquid splashed onto my hand, but I didn't cry out. I didn't scream anymore. I had gotten used to the sting of small burns, the kind that don't leave a mark on the skin, but rot you from the inside. Vanessa continued to rant about my seasoning, about my incompetence, about what a burden I was in her house. That word, her house, pierced me just like all the times before. This was my house, the house that Harold and I built brick by brick during 32 years of marriage, but I still didn't say a word. I walked toward the china cabinet with slow steps. My knees crunched. I am 68 years old, and my body now charges me for every humiliation with a new and distinct ache. I opened the door of the tall cabinet, the one where I kept the white porcelain dinnerware with gold trim that had belonged to my mother-in-law Martha, valued by an antique dealer at $180,000, the most treasured heirloom in the Miller family. I pulled out the entire stack of plates. Vanessa stopped screaming. "What are you doing, you crazy old lady?" I didn't answer. I just held that tower of porcelain with my trembling hands, those wrinkled hands she so despised, and I let it drop. The crash was magnificent. It was as if 50 years of silence had shattered all at once. The plates exploded against the ceramic floor into 1,000 sparkling pieces. Vanessa shrieked. Daniel came running from the living room, eyes wide with shock, his mouth open. He froze in the doorway, amid the fragments of porcelain that now covered my kitchen like dirty snow. I looked straight into his eyes, the same eyes that once looked at me with a son's love. And I said with a calm even I didn't recognize, "If nothing I do helps, then nothing matters anymore, does it?" The silence that followed was more terrifying than any scream, because my son, for the first time in 3 years, was afraid of me. And that was only the beginning of what was to come. If you want to know how a woman of almost 70 years old got back everything they stole from her, subscribe and follow this story to the end. Because what I did next, no one saw coming. But to understand that moment, to understand why I let $180,000 crash to the floor without blinking, I need to tell you how I got there. How I went from being Rose Miller, owner of my life and my home, to becoming a stranger in my own house. And believe me, what I discovered along the way was worse than any broken plate. It all began 3 years ago, on a Tuesday in October, that smelled like pumpkin spice and fresh coffee. Harold had died 6 months earlier, a massive heart attack while he was pruning the rose bushes in the garden. He fell among the flowers he loved so much, and I found him with dirt under his fingernails and a nearly peaceful expression on his face. The man of my life left without saying goodbye, and he left me alone in this 3-bedroom house in suburban Denver, Colorado, with $850,000 in savings and a hole in my chest that no money could fill. Daniel came to the funeral. He cried. He hugged me. He promised he would never leave me alone. For 2 months he kept his word. He called every week. He asked how I was, if I needed anything. I clung to those calls like a shipwrecked sailor to a piece of wood. He was my only son, the baby who nearly killed me when he was born, the boy Harold carried on his shoulders, the rebellious teenager who at 20 cried and apologized for having given us so much grief. Then she appeared, Vanessa. They arrived together one Saturday afternoon, unannounced. Daniel was wearing a wrinkled shirt and dark circles under his eyes that hung like drapes. She was wearing a tight, mustard-colored sweater and jeans that looked painted on. Perfect smile, impeccable nails, calculating eyes. "Mum, this is Vanessa, my girlfriend." She held out her hand to me with that smile I would later learn to hate. "It's a pleasure, Mrs. Miller. Daniel has told me so much about you." I made coffee. I brought out the donuts I had bought that morning from the local bakery. We sat in the living room. My living room, with the sand-colored denim furniture that Harold and I chose together 15 years ago. And Daniel started talking. The business had failed. "What business?" I asked. "An auto parts venture," he explained. He had invested all his savings with a partner, a guy named Gary. Now he was in debt, $400,000 in the hole. The bank was pressuring him. He needed a place to stay while he got back on his feet. "Just a few months, Mum, I swear. Just until I find a job and can pay them back." Vanessa placed her hand on Daniel's. Her eyes sparkled, but not with tears, with something I couldn't identify at the time. "I'll look for a job too, Mum. We don't want to be a burden. We just need a break." I looked at them both. My son looked destroyed, defeated, and I, idiot that I am, could only sound the 7-year-old boy who ran to hug me when he came home from school. "Stay," I said. "This is your home." Vanessa smiled. Daniel hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. I didn't know I had just signed my own death warrant. They moved in a week later, suitcase after suitcase, box after box. They took the master bedroom, my bedroom, the one I shared with Harold for 32 years, because it was bigger, and Daniel needed space to work on his computer. I moved to the guest room. It faced the backyard and would fill with dampness every rainy season. "It's temporary, Mum," Daniel said, as he arranged his clothes in the closet where his father's shirts still hung. 6 months later, they got married. A quick wedding at the courthouse, without telling me until 2 days before. "We want something intimate, Mom," Vanessa explained with that saccharine voice she used when she needed something. "Just us, you know. No complications." I went. I brought flowers. I cried silently as I watched them sign the papers, and they never left. Every time I asked when they would look for their own place, Daniel changed the subject. Vanessa sighed deeply and commented on how tough the economy was, how expensive rent was, how much they appreciated my generosity. Generosity. That word she used like a whip, disguised as a caress. Little by little, the house stopped being mine. Vanessa replaced the living room curtains, the ivory linen ones I sewed myself, with modern, metallic grey ones. "Yours were too old, mother-in-law. They needed an update." She moved the furniture. She took down the photographs of Harold and me from the wall and replaced them with abstract art she bought at a flea market. "We have to modernize this place, don't you think? It looks like we're living in the 90s. I kept silent. I swallowed hard. I told myself they were just material things, that the important thing was having my son close. But it wasn't just that. Vanessa started imposing rules, like set times for me to take a shower. "You use too much hot water and electricity is expensive." Restrictions in the kitchen. "I'll do the cooking, Mum. You're too old for all that effort." Prohibitions on using the living room when they had guests. "It's just that well, you smell a little like an old lady. Don't take it personally." And Daniel? Daniel looked the other way. He buried himself in his phone. He went out to the store just when I started to complain. "Don't complicate things, Mum," he would tell me when I managed to corner him alone. "Vanessa just wants order in her house." Her house. Those 2 words left me breathless the first time I heard them come out of my son's mouth. 3 years passed like that. 3 years of becoming invisible in my own home. 3 years of hand washing their clothes because the washing machine used too much electricity. 3 years of eating alone in the kitchen while they ate dinner in the living room, watching Netflix. 3 years of listening to Vanessa criticize everything I did, from how I swept to how I breathed. And I put up with it. Because he was my son. Because I was afraid of being completely alone. Because at 68 years old, the world outside was scarier than the hell inside. Until I found the papers. And discovered that what I thought was hell was just the lobby. The small humiliation are the ones that hurt the most. Not the big ones. You see those coming. You prepare. You defend yourself. It's the little ones, those that arrive disguised as concern or help, that slowly eat away at you from the inside, until one day you look in the mirror and no longer recognize the woman staring back. Vanessa was an expert in those. It all started with the alarm clock. Every morning at 6 o'clock sharp, she would rap on my door with her knuckles, 3 dry, authoritarian knocks. "Mrs. Miller, it's time now. Breakfast doesn't make itself." At first, I thought it was just for a couple of days, but it became routine, a ritual, an obligation. I would get up with an aching body. The arthritis in my knees attacked me worse in the mornings, and I would drag myself to the kitchen while they were still sleeping in my bed, under my sheets, in my bedroom. I would prepare eggs and bacon, hash browns, warm biscuits, cinnamon coffee, everything just the way Daniel liked it since he was a kid. But nothing was ever enough. "The eggs are runny," Vanessa would say, pushing the plate away with disdain. "You can't even crack an egg properly, Mom." "The coffee is cold," she complained without looking up from her phone. "You let it sit too long again." Daniel ate in silence, his eyes fixed on his plate, as if he didn't hear anything, as if I didn't exist. Then came the laundry. "Mom, the washer uses too much electricity," Vanessa announced one afternoon, hands on her hips, standing in the patio doorway. "Besides, you don't pay a single dime for utilities. The least you can do is hand wash." So there I was, at 68 years old, my hands no longer strong as they used to be, kneeling in front of a plastic tub, scrubbing her silk blouses, her designer jeans, my son's underwear, which broke my heart to touch, because it reminded me of when he was a baby, and I changed his diapers with all the love in the world. My knuckles cracked, my skin peeled, but I couldn't complain, because it was the least I could do after so much generosity. That cursed word again, generosity. Then came the time restrictions. "You can't shower after 7 o'clock in the evening," Vanessa ordered. "The water heater consumes too much gas, and we're the ones paying for it." "You can't watch television in the living room when we have company," she added another day. "It's just that, well, you smell a little odd. It's not personal, Mom, it's just, you know, at your age. The body changes." She humiliated me in front of her friends, in front of her parents. Once, during a dinner party, she organized without telling me. She locked me in my room and turned the key from the outside. "She's just very tired," I heard her tell the guests. "Better for her to rest." I spent 3 hours in there, listening to laughter and music on the other side of the door, knocking without anyone coming to open up, until the party ended and Vanessa remembered she had locked me in. "Oh, I'm sorry, mother-in-law. I completely forgot." And Daniel, my son, the child I gave birth to after 22 hours of labor, nothing. Absolute silence. One afternoon, I confronted him. I waited for him in the hallway as he was leaving the bathroom, his hair still wet, smelling of that expensive shampoo they bought with my money. "Daniel, I need to talk to you." "Not right now, Mum. I'm in a hurry." "It's important." He sighed. That sigh I knew so well, the one he used as a teenager when I asked him to clean his room. "What is it now? Your wife? Vanessa?" She treats me badly, son. She humiliates me. She makes me feel like I'm in the way in my own house. He rubbed his face with his hands. He avoided my gaze. Mum, you're old now. Don't complicate things. Vanessa just wants order in her house. If you don't like it, well, you can look for another place. I felt the floor open up beneath my feet. Her house? Daniel, this is my house. I paid for it with your father for 30 years. Yes, but now we pay the utilities. We keep things running. You're just here. You're just here. Those 3 words took my breath away. My son looked at me as if I were a piece of old furniture that was no longer useful, but that, out of pity, they didn't dare throw away. What did that woman do to you, Daniel? Where is the son I raised? I grew up, Mum. That's what happened. I'm not your little boy anymore. I have my own family now. He left. He left me standing in the hallway, tears streaming down my cheeks, hugging myself because there was no one else to hug me anymore. I didn't eat dinner that night. I stayed in my room, looking at the damp stains on the ceiling, wondering at what point I had lost my son. But the worst was still to come. 3 weeks later, while looking for an electric bill that Vanessa swore I had misplaced, I opened the desk drawer in the study, the one that had been Harold's, and found a manila folder hidden beneath some old folders. I opened it with trembling hands, and what I saw inside made the world stop. They were legal documents, notarized deeds, papers stamped with the seal of a lawyer I didn't know. And my name, Rose Miller, widow of Sanchez, appeared again and again next to words that chilled my blood. Mental incapacity, progressive senility, inability to manage assets. They were trying to declare me mentally incompetent. They were trying to take everything from me. My own flesh and blood was stealing the house that Harold had given 30 years of his life for. My hands were shaking so much I could barely hold the papers. There were medical reports, false ones because I had never been to that doctor, with invented diagnoses. Declarations signed by witnesses who supposedly had seen my mental decline. Everything carefully fabricated. And at the end of the file, a document that struck me like a bullet. Bank statements. From the joint account I had opened with Daniel for emergencies, the one that held the $850,000 Harold left me. Only $330,000 remained. They had taken $520,000. More than $500,000. Stolen. By my son and that viper who called herself my daughter-in-law. I collapsed into the desk chair, the same one where Harold sat doing the accounting on Sundays, and sobbed until I had no tears left. How had I gotten here? How had I allowed them to destroy me like this? The answer was simple and painful. Because I loved them. Because they were my family. Because I was afraid of being alone. But that afternoon, among those papers that reeked of betrayal, something changed inside me. Fear began to turn into rage, and rage, as they would soon discover, can be much more dangerous than silence. I put the documents back exactly as I found them. With hands that were still trembling, I folded each paper along the original creases, put them back into the manila folder, and hid it under the same old folders. I closed the drawer slowly, silently, as if someone could hear me even though the house was empty. Vanessa had gone shopping. Daniel was on another job interview. Another lie in the collection they had built around me. I sat on the living room sofa, the one they no longer allowed me to use when they were home, and looked at the walls of my house as if seeing them for the first time. Harold's photographs had disappeared. The memories of 32 years of marriage erased as if they had never existed. In their place, soulless pictures Vanessa had bought on sale. $520,000. The figure spun in my head like a vulture over carrion. That was more than money. It was Harold's sweat, getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning for 30 years to drive his taxi. It was the nights I spent awake sewing clothes for others to save up the down payment on this house. It was every dollar saved, every luxury denied, every sacrifice made with the promise that one day we could rest. And my son, my own flesh and blood, had stolen it while forcing me to hand wash his clothes. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the papers to declare me incompetent, to legally erase me, to turn me into a ghost in my own life. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. And in that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me destroyed. Over the next few days, I became a consummate actress. Every morning, I got up at 6, made breakfast, endured Vanessa's insults with my head bowed, did the laundry, cleaned the floors. I made myself small, invisible, harmless. But inside, I was plotting. I needed help. I couldn't face this alone, and there was only one person in the world I could completely trust. Eleanor, my first cousin. 71 years of pure steel wrapped in elegance. A retired lawyer from Phoenix, Arizona, with 3 successful children and 0 tolerance for nonsense. We had grown up together, shared rag dolls and teenage secrets. She was the only real family I had left. I called her on a Tuesday afternoon, when Vanessa left for her yoga class. Another thing paid for with my money. And Daniel was, God knows where, doing God knows what. "Cousin, what's wrong? You haven't called me in months." And then I broke down. I told her everything. The humiliations, the insults, the stolen money, the fake documents. Every word came out between sobs I could no longer hold back. 3 years of pain, condensed into 20 minutes of phone confession. There was silence when I finished. A silence so heavy I thought the call had been disconnected. "Eleanor, I'm here." Her voice sounded different, cold, dangerous. "And you're going to let that viper take what Harold built with his sweat? Are you going to let your son, my nephew, rob you and erase you as if you were worthless?" "I don't know what to do." "Well, I do know. Listen to me closely, Rose. Those documents are worthless without your signature and a formal trial. Worthless. But if we don't act now, they'll forge your signature or pressure you until you give in. Do you understand me?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "You need a lawyer. Today. Right now. I don't have money for... I have contacts. A colleague from law school who specializes in these cases. I'm going to call him right now. But Rose, hear me out. You have to be strong. You have all the power here. The house is in your name. The money is yours. The problem is you've believed the story that you're useless. It's time to remember who the heck you are, cousin. You're Rose Miller, the woman who raised a son while her husband worked 12 hours a day. The one who built a home from the ground up. The one who survived the death of her life partner. You are not the useless old lady that Wretch wants you to believe you are." Something ignited inside me. A small but fierce spark. What do I have to do? First, don't touch those documents. Leave them there as evidence. Second, the lawyer is going to call you tomorrow. His name is Robert Martin. You tell him everything. Third, you need proof of the humiliations. Do you have a way to record them? I don't know how to use those things. Do you have trusted neighbors? I thought of Lucy, the girl in apartment 42, a nursing student, always kind, always asking if I needed anything when we passed each other on the street. Yes, there's a young woman. Perfect. Ask her for help. Tell her you need to install cameras or record with your phone. Young people know about those things. We need evidence of how they treat you. Every insult, every humiliation, everything. Eleanor, I'm scared. I know, cousin. But you know what's scarier? Ending your days in a nursing home while those two spend your money on vacations. Is that what you want? No. Then fight. Fight with everything you have. And you are not alone. I'm coming down there this weekend. We are going to sink that viper and that ungrateful son until they beg for mercy. We hung up. I stayed seated in the living room, looking at my wrinkled hands. Those hands that Vanessa so despised. And for the first time in 3 years, I didn't see them as weak. I saw them as weapons. The next day, Robert Martin called me. Professional voice, serious tone. He explained the legal steps to protect my property and my money. He told me I needed to act fast, block access to the bank account, gather evidence of fraud, document the abuse. Mrs. Miller, the law is on your side, but I need you to be brave. Can you do that? I looked toward the kitchen, where Vanessa was preparing a smoothie with organic ingredients that cost $300, ingredients I had unknowingly paid for. Yes, I replied. I can do that. That afternoon, when Vanessa left for the salon, I knocked on the door of apartment 42. Lucy opened it with her usual smile. Mrs. Miller, how nice to see you. Come in. Come in. Lucy, I need your help, and I can't explain everything, but trust me. I told her the basics. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, her brown eyes filled with indignation. That miserable woman. Excuse my language, ma'am, but that's what she is. Of course I'll help you. Look, I have some small cameras I bought for my school project. They can be easily hidden, and I'll show you how to record with your cell phone. We spent 2 hours practicing. How to turn on the phone's audio recorder without being noticed. Where to place the mini cameras. In the clock in the living room, in the kitchen vase, in the picture frame in the hallway. When she treats you badly, record everything, Lucy instructed. Every word, no matter how cruel it is. In fact, the worse, the better. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, while I was preparing dinner, Vanessa stormed into the kitchen. What is this garbage? She shouted, pointing at the chicken stew I was cooking. How many times do I have to tell you that Daniel doesn't eat onions? Are you deaf or stupid? My cell phone was in the pocket of my apron. Recording. I'm sorry, Sorry, that's all you know how to say. You know what? Don't even cook anymore. You're useless. A burden. If Daniel weren't so noble, he would have kicked you out years ago. Every word was recorded with perfect clarity. At your age, you should be grateful that we support you. Most old women like you end up abandoned, eating scraps in some miserable nursing home. I kept my head down, my hands busy peeling potatoes. But inside I was smiling, because every insult was a bullet I would later use against her. Over the next 2 weeks, I collected evidence like a patient hunter. The cameras captured Vanessa yelling at me, insulting me, treating me like trash. The audio recorded her cruel comments about my age, my smell, my uselessness. And then I found something I wasn't even looking for. One night, unable to sleep, I went down to the kitchen for a glass of water. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. The house was silent, but as I passed the living room, I heard voices whispering in the master bedroom. Vanessa. But she wasn't talking to Daniel. She was talking on the phone. I crept closer to the door, my heart pounding in my chest. The wood was ajar just a centimetre. I took out my cell phone, activated the recorder, and held my breath. Don't be impatient, my love. Everything is almost ready, Vanessa was saying in a voice I had never heard from her before. Soft, affectionate, intimate. The lawyer says we'll have the deeds in a month at most. Yes, in my name. The idiot doesn't suspect anything. He thinks I'm doing it for him. She laughed, a laugh that chilled my blood. Of course I'm going to leave him, Gary. You think I married that imbecile for love? Please. He was just the means to get the house. Yeah, the old lady is almost neutralized. As soon as I have everything signed, I'll file for divorce and we'll take off for Miami, Florida, like we planned. Gary, the partner in the failed business, the partner who supposedly had robbed them of everything. There was no business. There never was. Everything, absolutely everything, had been a lie from the beginning. Vanessa wasn't just robbing me, she was also robbing Daniel. And my son, so stupid and blinded, was part of the plan without even knowing it. I recorded every word, every laugh, every detail of the plan to leave me penniless and abandon my son like a street dog for 10 minutes. When I went back up to my room, I was no longer shaking with fear. I was shaking with pure, crystal clear rage. Now I had everything I needed, and best of all, they had no idea that the useless old lady had just become the most dangerous person in that house. The calendar marked March 15th, my 69th birthday, 1 year closer to 70, 1 year further from the Harold, who sang to me with his off-key voice while bringing me coffee in bed. I expected nothing. I had learned not to expect anything, but Vanessa had other plans. Mother-in-law, she said that morning with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We're going to organize a little dinner party to celebrate your birthday. Something intimate, family only. How does that sound? It caught me by surprise. For 3 years, my birthday had passed unnoticed. Not a single congratulation, not a hug, not even a text message from Daniel. And now, suddenly, they wanted to celebrate. It's not necessary, I said cautiously. I don't want to cause any trouble. Oh, don't be like that. We insist, right, sweetie? She nudged Daniel, who was eating breakfast without looking up from his phone. Yeah, sure. Happy birthday, Mum. He didn't even look at me when he said it. Something wasn't adding up. My instinct, the one I had been ignoring for 3 years, screamed at me to be careful. But I nodded. I smiled. I pretended to be grateful, because now I knew how to play the game too. I spent the day preparing my own party. Vanessa had me cleaning the house so everything would look presentable. I dusted, mopped, cleaned the bathrooms, polished the mirrors. My knees screamed in pain. My back was burning, but I didn't complain. My cell phone in my pocket recorded every order, every hurtful comment. Mum, clean that corner well. Don't you see it's full of cobwebs? Oh God, at your age you can't even see properly. Hurry up. The guests arrive at 7 o'clock, and the kitchen still needs to be done. At 6 o'clock in the evening, when I finished making the house sparkle, I went up to my room to change. I put on a burgundy dress I hadn't worn since Harold's funeral. I applied minimal makeup, a little powder, discreet lipstick. I combed my grey hair that Vanessa always said made me look messy. I looked in the mirror. The woman who looked back seemed tired, but there was something new in her eyes, something hard, determined. Happy birthday, Rose, I told myself. May this be the last one you spend being a coward. I went downstairs at 7 o'clock sharp. The living room was decorated, gold-coloured balloons, which I had inflated that afternoon, and a sign that read, Happy Birthday, hanging on the wall. The dining table was set with the embroidered linen tablecloth that had been my mother's. But when I saw who the guests were, my stomach churned. Vanessa's parents, her brother with his girlfriend, 3 of her friends I had never seen before. That guy Gary, yes, the supposed partner who had robbed them, sitting there as if nothing had happened, a beer in his hand. Not a single person I knew, not my church friends, not my cousin Eleanor, not the neighbours I had shared 30 years of life with. This wasn't my birthday party. It was Vanessa's party. I was just the excuse. "There's the birthday girl," Vanessa announced in a sing-song voice, pointing at me as if I were a circus animal. "Come on, everyone, come say hello to her." They surrounded me with fake hugs and empty congratulations. Vanessa's father, a heavy-set man who smelled of cheap cigar smoke, patted me on the back. "Happy birthday, Mom. 69? Wow. My mother didn't even make it to 65. What an appropriate comment for a party. We sat down to eat dinner. Vanessa had ordered food from an expensive restaurant. Pasta, gourmet salads, artisan bread. All paid for with the money they had stolen from my account. I sat at the end of the table, the least important spot, while Vanessa presided like a queen in my chair, in my dining room, in my house. Daniel was next to her, smiling awkwardly, serving wine to the guests. "A toast," Vanessa's father announced, raising his glass. "To Mrs. Miller, who is lucky to have such a dedicated daughter-in-law to take care of her in her old age." Everyone laughed and toasted. I held my glass of water. They hadn't served me wine, and I forced a smile. "Yes, it is lucky," continued Vanessa's mother, a thin woman with too much makeup. "At her age, many women end up alone, abandoned by their families. What a blessing that Daniel and my daughter took her in." Took her in. As if I were a homeless person they rescued from the street. No one mentioned that it was my house, that they were the ones I took in when they arrived with nothing. The dinner continued with laughter and anecdotes that didn't include me. They talked about trips, restaurants, future plans. I was just another piece of furniture in the room, invisible, irrelevant, until Vanessa made the announcement. She tapped her glass with a knife to get attention. Everyone quieted down. She stood up, radiant, with that perfect smile she had perfected. "Well, since we're all gathered here, Daniel and I want to share some exciting news." My son also stood up, holding her hand. "We are going to completely renovate the house," Vanessa announced, opening her arms, as if presenting a television project. "New bathrooms, modern kitchen, hardwood floors, everything. We already have the budget, and we're starting next month." Applause, congratulations. "How exciting! How wonderful!" No one asked my opinion. She continued, pointing at the living room walls. "We are going to throw away all those antiques that Mrs. Miller has stored up. Old furniture, antique photos, that porcelain china that no one uses. All of that is going. The house looks like a museum from the 70s. Laughter, murmurs of approval. I felt like I was choking. Those antiques were my life. Every photograph was a memory of Harold. Every piece of furniture, a story. The porcelain china had belonged to 3 generations of Miller women. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice barely audible. "Those things have sentimental value. You can't—" "Oh, mother-in-law!" Vanessa interrupted me, turning toward me with that expression of false patience I hated so much. "At your age, you have to learn to detach yourself from material things. Besides, we need space. You can't live in the past forever." Vanessa's brother burst out laughing. "That's right. My grandma was the same way. She saved even broken underwear because it had sentimental value." More laughter. I sank into my chair, my cheeks burning with humiliation. Then Gary, that cursed Gary, who whispered dirty things to my daughter-in-law on the phone while my son slept, raised his glass. "Well, I toast to Vanessa and Daniel, to the perfect couple who know how to modernize an old house. Old house, like me. And we have to be grateful," Vanessa added, looking directly at me with eyes full of venom disguised as honey, "that Mrs. Miller is so understanding. At her age, many end up in a nursing home, eating mush and watching television all day. But she has the fortune to be here, with us, being part of the family. An uncomfortable silence. Some guests looked away, others smiled nervously, but no one defended me. And Daniel, my son, my only son, stood there, glass in hand, avoiding my gaze. "Well," said Vanessa's father, breaking the tension, "where is the cake?" Vanessa clapped. "Oh, yes, I brought a special one. Daniel, help me." They went out to the kitchen. The guests resumed their conversations. I stayed seated in my corner, with a lump in my throat so large I could barely breathe. They returned with a small cake, more suitable for a child than for someone turning 69, with candles lit. They placed it in front of me. "Time to sing," Vanessa ordered. They sang Happy Birthday, off-key, quickly, without enthusiasm, like someone fulfilling a bothersome obligation. "Make a wish, mother-in-law." I looked at the candles. I looked at the faces around me. Strangers. All strangers. I looked at my son, who finally held my gaze for a second before turning away. And in that moment, something inside me finally broke. It wasn't just pain. It was rage, anger, burning indignation. But I didn't say a word. I just closed my eyes, made a wish they would never imagine, and blew out the candles. Tepid applause. Vanessa cut the cake, a tiny piece for me, generous ones for everyone else. We ate in uncomfortable silence. At 10 o'clock in the evening, the guests began to leave. Farewell hugs. "Happy birthday, Mom. Take care. You're in good hands." When the last one left, Vanessa collapsed onto the sofa with a dramatic sigh. "That was exhausting. Daniel, clean this up while I take a shower." My son obeyed like a trained dog, picking up dirty plates, glasses, crumpled napkins. I stayed seated in my corner, looking at the remnants of my birthday party that hadn't been mine at all. Daniel walked past me carrying plates to the kitchen. He didn't say a word. Not an extra happy birthday. Not I hope you had fun. Nothing. I went up to my room with heavy legs and an even heavier heart. I took off the burgundy dress and hung it in the closet. I sat on the bed. That creaking twin bed, so different from the king size in my bedroom that they now occupied. And I took out the photograph of Harold that I kept in the nightstand drawer. "Forgive me," I whispered, to that black and white image of my husband, smiling in his taxi driver's uniform. "Forgive me for being so weak, for letting them trample on everything we built together." Tears fell onto the glass of the picture frame, distorting his face. "But no more, my love, I swear it, no more." I put the photograph away, took out my cell phone, reviewed the day's recordings. Every disguised insult, every public humiliation, all perfectly documented. Then I dialed Eleanor's number. She answered on the second ring. "Cousin, what's wrong? It's almost 11 o'clock. "Eleanor," I said in a firm voice, with no tears now, "I need you to come tomorrow, not this weekend, tomorrow." What happened? What happened is that I've finished collecting evidence. What happened is that I have everything I need. And what happened is that today, on my 69th birthday, they humiliated me for the very last time. There was a pause. "I'm packing my suitcase now," my cousin replied. "And I'm calling Robert to get everything ready. The game is over, Rose. Now the war begins." I hung up, turned off the light. But I couldn't sleep, because for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't afraid of the next day. I felt anticipation. The next morning dawned grey. Heavy clouds covered the Denver sky, threatening a storm, but I felt strangely light, as if something toxic had finally drained from my body overnight. I got up before Vanessa knocked on my door. I dressed carefully. Denim pants, a mustard-coloured blouse, the knit sweater Harold gave me for our last anniversary. I looked in the mirror, and for the first time in months, I recognized the woman reflected there. Rose Miller, not the victim, not the useless old lady. The woman who had survived poverty, difficult childbirth, the death of her husband. The one who had fire in her veins, even if she had forgotten it for a while. I went down to the kitchen. I made coffee, just for me. I took a donut from the cabinet. I sat at the table and ate breakfast in silence, looking out the window as the clouds grew darker and darker. At 9 o'clock in the morning, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Vanessa appeared in sweatpants and a t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, yawning. "Good morning," I said calmly. She looked at me in surprise. "Did you already eat breakfast? And ours?" "I haven't prepared it yet." Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" "I haven't prepared it yet. If you want breakfast, the kitchen is right there." The silence that followed was delicious. Vanessa stood in the doorway, her mouth slightly open, processing what she had just heard. It was probably the first time in 3 years that I hadn't jumped up to obey her. "Are you feeling ill, mother-in-law?" she asked with that saccharine voice she used when preparing an attack. "I feel perfectly fine. Thank you." "Then I don't understand why. Because I am 69 years old and my knees hurt. Because yesterday I cleaned this entire house for your party. Because I am tired. And because, honestly, you both have 2 perfectly functional hands." Vanessa's eyes flashed with barely contained fury. She opened her mouth to reply, but at that moment, the doorbell rang, loud, insistent, as if someone was ringing urgently. "Are you expecting someone?" Vanessa asked suspiciously. "Yes." I got up from the table calmly, walked to the front door and opened it. There stood Eleanor. 71 years of pure elegance, wrapped in a sand-coloured pantsuit, short hair perfectly styled, gold-rimmed glasses, a travel suitcase next to her. She looked like a lawyer even on her day off, because that's what she had always been. A woman who wouldn't let anyone get the best of her. "Cousin," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Eleanor." We hugged tightly. She smelled of French perfume and determination. "Who is it?" Vanessa asked from the kitchen, peering out with a hostile look. Eleanor walked in, dragging her suitcase, looking my daughter-in-law up and down with an expression that could freeze lava. "I'm Eleanor Miller, Rose's cousin, a lawyer. And you are—" "Vanessa, Daniel's wife, the owner of this house." "Oh, what a mistake!" Eleanor let out a dry laugh. "The owner? Interesting. Because according to the deeds I reviewed yesterday with the notary, the only owner of this property is Rose Miller, widow of Sanchez. But hey, maybe you have information I don't know about." Vanessa's face went pale. Then it turned red, then purple. I meant to say that—" "Don't worry. I know exactly what you meant to say." At that moment, Daniel came down the stairs, rubbing his eyes. "What is all this noise? Mum? Who? Aunt Eleanor?" "Daniel, it's been a long time, nephew." Her tone was cold as an iceberg. "The last time we saw each other was at Harold's funeral. 3 years. Not one call, not one visit." Daniel swallowed. "Well, we've been busy with robbing your mother. Yes, I heard." Absolute silence. Vanessa took a step forward. "Excuse me? Who do you think you are? Coming here to—" "I'm the cousin who is going to make sure you pay for every dollar you stole from Rose, and every humiliation, every insult, every day of abuse." Eleanor took her cell phone out of her purse. "Do you want me to play the recordings now, or would you prefer to keep pretending?" Vanessa's eyes widened. "Recordings? What are you talking about? The 27 audio recordings where you insult my cousin, the videos where you treat her like trash, the phone conversation where you tell your lover Gary that you are going to leave Daniel as soon as the house is in your name. Daniel stumbled as if he had been punched. What? Gary? What is she talking about? Vanessa turned white as a sheet of paper. That's a lie. This old woman is inventing things. Do you want me to ask your husband if it's a lie? Eleanor pressed a button on her phone. Vanessa's voice filled the room. Don't be impatient, my love. Everything is almost ready. The lawyer says we'll have the deeds in a month at most. Yes, in my name. The idiot doesn't suspect anything. He thinks I'm doing it for him. I watched my son collapse. Literally. He fell onto the stairs, his hands over his head, breathing in short gasps. Of course I'm going to leave him, Gary. You think I married that imbecile for love? Please. He was just the means to get the house. Turn it off, Daniel whispered. Please, turn it off. Eleanor stopped the recording. The silence that followed was so dense it could be cut with a knife. Vanessa tried to recover. That's taken out of context. I have 12 minutes of the complete audio, Eleanor interrupted her. Do you want me to continue? I also have the bank statements showing the $520,000 you withdrew from Rose's account, and the fake documents you prepared to declare her incompetent. Should I keep going? No one spoke. I stood next to Eleanor, my arms crossed, watching the castle of lies they had built crumble brick by brick. Daniel looked up at Vanessa. There were tears in his eyes. Is it true? Is all this true? Vanessa opened her mouth. She closed it. She searched for words she didn't find. Answer me, my son shouted, getting to his feet. Is it true? Daniel, if you let me explain, answer. Yes, she finally exploded. Yes, it's true. Happy. Happy to know you were used. Because that's what you are, Daniel. A means to an end. A useful idiot that... The slap echoed throughout the house. Daniel had slapped Vanessa. His hand was trembling. I had never seen him so furious. Get out, he said, his voice broken. Leave this house right now. This house is mine too, Vanessa spat, her cheek red. We're married. I have rights. This house, I said, speaking for the first time since Eleanor arrived, was never yours, and it never will be. And if you don't leave in the next 5 minutes, I'm calling the police and pressing charges for fraud, theft, and abuse. Vanessa looked at me with pure hatred. This isn't over. I'm going to sue you. I'm going to be... Go ahead, Eleanor said with a sharp smile. Do it. That way in court, I can officially present all the evidence. The judge is going to love the videos of you insulting a 69-year-old woman in her own home. Vanessa trembled with rage. She looked at Daniel for support. My son turned his face away. You're a coward, she spat at him. Just like your mother, 2 pathetic cowards. 3 minutes, I said without flinching. Vanessa stormed up the stairs. We heard her opening drawers, throwing things, cursing. 15 minutes later, she came down with 2 suitcases, her hair a mess, her eyes burning with fury. This doesn't end here, she hissed, before walking out and slamming the door. When the sound of her heels faded in the distance, Daniel collapsed. He fell to his knees in the middle of the living room, sobbing like a child. Mum, I didn't know. I didn't know anything about Gary. About the money, about the documents. I thought... I didn't move. I just looked down at him. This son who had betrayed me, who had let me be humiliated for 3 years, who had chosen silence over defending me. You thought what, Daniel? I asked in a calm voice. You thought it was okay for her to treat me like trash. You thought I deserved to sleep in the service room while you two occupied my bedroom. You thought hand-washing your clothes at my 69 years of age was fair. I am an idiot. A coward. You're right. I didn't defend you. I watched her humiliate you and I did nothing. Forgive me, Mum. Please. Tears streamed down his face. He seemed sincere, destroyed, broken. But I had also been destroyed, and broken, and no one had helped me. I don't know if I can forgive you, Daniel, I finally said. I don't know if I can ever forget that when I needed you most, you abandoned me, that you chose that woman over your own mother. I know, and I hate myself for it. But give me a chance. Just one chance to fix it. Eleanor placed her hand on my shoulder. The decision is yours, cousin. I looked at my son, 38 years old, kneeling on the floor, crying like the boy he once was. And I felt something strange in my chest. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But maybe it was something close to the possibility of forgiveness. Someday. Maybe. Get up, I said. And listen to me carefully. Starting today, things are going to change in this house. This is my house. You are here because I allow it. And if you want to earn even a speck of my trust back, you're going to have to work very hard. Anything, he sobbed. Anything, Mum. First, you're going to look for a job. Today, not tomorrow. Today. Second, you're going to pay back every dollar you stole from my account. I don't know how, but you're going to do it. Third, you're going to get therapy, because you have serious problems you need to fix. He nodded frantically. Yes, whatever you say. And fourth, I added in a softer voice, you're going to help me restore the house your father and I built. You're going to take down those horrible pictures Vanessa put up. You're going to hang Harold's photographs back up. You're going to give this place its soul back. I will. I promise you. I don't know if I believed him. Honestly, at that moment, I didn't know if I would ever believe my son again. But at least he had taken the first step. And I had recovered my voice. The days that followed were strange, like waking up from a long nightmare and discovering that the world was still spinning, but everything looked different, sharper, more real. Eleanor stayed with me. We installed her suitcase in the guest room, my bedroom, which I finally recovered, while Daniel moved to the smallest room, the one that faced the backyard. He was no longer the king of the house. He was barely a tolerated tenant. And I needed things to stay that way for a while, because although Vanessa had left the house, the legal battle was just beginning. Listen closely, cousin, Eleanor told me that night, as we drank chamomile tea in the living room, my living room, with my furniture back in place. Vanessa is going to fight back. She's a cornered viper, and those are the most dangerous. She's going to find lawyers. She's going to try to claim marital rights. She's going to invent stories. Can she do that? Can she take anything from me? Legally, no. The house was in your name before the marriage. It's your individual property. But that doesn't mean she won't try. That's why we need to be 3 steps ahead of her. Robert Martin, the lawyer Eleanor had found for me, came the next day. A man in his 50s, impeccable grey suit, a worn leather briefcase that spoke of years of experience. The 4 of us sat at the dining table, Robert, Eleanor, Daniel, and I, with documents spread out on the wooden table that Harold had bought at an auction 20 years ago. Mrs. Miller, Robert began, adjusting his glasses. The situation is serious but manageable. First, the good news. You have solid proof of fraud, misappropriation, and abuse. The videos and audio are compelling evidence. The fake documents to declare you incompetent are a serious crime. And the bad news? I asked. Recovering the stolen money is going to be complicated. Your son and his wife spent that $520,000, some on renovations that added value to the house, which can be argued as investment, others on personal expenses that will be difficult to trace. I looked at Daniel. He was pale, with deep, dark circles under his eyes. He hadn't slept well since Vanessa left. What did they spend my money on? I asked directly. My son swallowed. I don't know everything. Vanessa handled the finances, but I know she remodeled the master bedroom, changed the floors, bought new furniture, paid for her car. Her car? A Mazda CX-5, 2024 model, $380,000. It's in her name. Rage climbed my throat again. Almost $500,000 on a car. With my money. We can put a lien on the vehicle, Robert said, taking notes. We can also file criminal charges for fraud. But Mrs. Miller, I need you to understand something. A lawsuit like this can last years. It's emotionally and financially exhausting. What do you recommend then? Robert exchanged a look with Eleanor. My cousin nodded slightly. There's another option, the lawyer continued. Faster, more forceful, but it requires you to be willing to play a little dirty. How dirty? A small smile crossed his face. Legal, but intimidating. You see, Vanessa Salinas, that's your daughter-in-law's name, right? Has a history that we investigated. 3 previous jobs where she was fired for accounting irregularities. A civil lawsuit in Phoenix for defrauding an elderly man. It never went to trial because they reached an out-of-court settlement, but the record exists. I straightened in my chair. She had done this before? Apparently, yes. She has a pattern. She gets close to men with older mothers who own property. She seduces them. She marries quickly. She tries to take possession of the assets. And when it doesn't work or she gets what she wants, she disappears. Daniel covered his face with his hands. My God, was I that stupid? Yes, you were, I said without pity. But now you're going to help me fix it. Robert laid out a plan on the table. Here is my proposal. We prepare a legal package so solid that when she sees it, Vanessa will understand that she has no escape. Criminal complaint for fraud, civil suit for damages, lien on the vehicle, restraining order. And this is important, a threat of public exposure. Public exposure? Social media, local Facebook groups. A well-told story about how a woman took advantage of a 69-year-old lady. In this era, public shame can be more effective than any lawsuit. Eleanor smiled with satisfaction. What Robert is proposing is to pressure her until she accepts a settlement, to return what she can, to sign papers relinquishing any right to this property, and to get out of Denver forever. And if she doesn't accept, then we activate everything. We sink her legally and socially. But my experience tells me she will accept. Predators like her prefer to flee rather than face the consequences. I looked at the documents, the photographs of Vanessa that Robert had obtained, the old records, the evidence I myself had collected for weeks. Do it, I finally said. Prepare everything, but I want to be present when you hand it to her. Robert nodded. It will be done. I need a week to assemble the complete file. Meanwhile, Mrs. Miller, it is crucial that you have no contact with her. No messages, no calls, no chance encounters. Total silence. During that week, I dedicated myself to recovering my house. With Daniel's help, who worked like a man possessed, perhaps trying to atone for his guilt, we removed every trace of Vanessa. The abstract art went in the trash. The grey curtains were donated. The modern throw pillows she had bought were given to Lucy, my neighbour. We rehung Harold's photographs, my husband smiling with his impeccably clean taxi, the two of us in Los Angeles on our honeymoon, Daniel as a baby in his father's arms, the family we had been. "I'm sorry, Dad," Daniel whispered as he hung a photograph in the living room. "I'm sorry I allowed them to erase your memory from this house." I didn't say a word. I just kept cleaning. We reclaimed my bedroom. We took out the expensive furniture Vanessa had bought, with my money, and put back the cedar wood bed that Harold had built with his own hands, the antique dresser that had belonged to my mother, the ivory knit bedspread that took me 6 months to finish. Every object that returned to its place was like recovering a piece of my soul. One afternoon, while organizing the dresser drawers, I found something that stopped me cold. A navy blue velvet box, hidden under some sweaters. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside were jewels. My jewelry. The pieces I thought I had lost or that Vanessa had thrown away. The pearl necklace Harold gave me for our 20th anniversary. The gold earrings with small rubies that were my grandmother's. The engagement ring I no longer wore because arthritis had swollen my fingers. Vanessa had hidden them. She probably planned to sell them or keep them. I called Daniel. "Look at this." My son turned pale when he saw the jewelry. "I didn't know she—" "How many other things didn't you know, Daniel? How many times did you choose not to see?" He collapsed onto the bed, his head in his hands. "Every day I discover something new. Every day I realize how blind I was. How could I have been such an idiot?" For the first time since Vanessa left, I felt some compassion for my son. He had also been a victim, manipulated, used, but that didn't erase what he had done to me. "Daniel," I said, sitting next to him, "I want you to understand something. Vanessa may have deceived you. She may have manipulated you. But when she humiliated me, when she insulted me, when she treated me like trash, you were there, conscious, awake, and you chose to do nothing. I know. I don't know if I can ever completely forgive you for that. Honestly, I don't know. But if you want even a chance, you have to earn it. With actions, not words. I'll do whatever it takes, Mum. I swear it. Then start by finding a job. A real one. No excuses." He nodded, and to my surprise, he followed through. 3 days later, he got a job at a hardware store. It wasn't much. A sales associate, $8,000 a month. But it was a start. I saw him leave that first morning in an orange uniform and carrying a lunchbox I had prepared for him. And for a second, I saw the 20-year-old boy who worked at a gas station to pay for college. Maybe not all was lost. That Friday, Robert called. "Everything is ready, Mrs. Miller. The complete file. When do you want us to deliver it to Vanessa?" "Where is she now?" "Renting an apartment in a neighborhood in downtown Denver. She's living with Gary Soto, her lover. He has a criminal record, by the way. Petty fraud. Bounced checks." "Of course, vipers always stick together. I want to hand her the papers in person," I said. "I want to see her face when she understands that she lost." "Mrs. Miller," Robert's voice was cautious, "I don't know if that's a good idea. These situations can become volatile. I'll go with Eleanor. And you. I won't be alone, but I need to do this. Do you understand?" There was a pause. "I understand. Then let's schedule the meeting for Monday. In my office. Neutral ground. I'll tell her it's to negotiate the divorce. That will make her come." I hung up the phone. Eleanor looked at me from the sofa with a proud smile. "Ready for the final round?" "More than ready," I replied. "It's time for Vanessa Salinas to learn that a 69-year-old woman can be much more dangerous than she looks." And so, with my heart beating strong but steady, I prepared for the moment I had been waiting for, the moment the hunter would become the prey. Monday dawned clear, as if even the sky knew that something important was going to happen that day. I dressed carefully, a terracotta-coloured pantsuit and blouse, comfortable closed-toe shoes, the pearl necklace I had recovered. Nothing ostentatious, but also not the defeated old lady Vanessa expected to find. I looked in the mirror. The woman reflected there had dark circles under her eyes. She hadn't slept well, but her eyes shone with something that had been absent for 3 years. Pure determination. "Ready?" Eleanor asked from my bedroom door. She was also impeccable, in a pearl grey pantsuit and her leather briefcase under her arm. "Ready." Daniel was waiting for us in the living room. He insisted on coming with us. "It's my responsibility too, Mum. I need to be there." I didn't argue. Perhaps it was time for my son to see the consequences of his decisions head on. Robert Martin's office was in downtown Denver, on the 3rd floor of a restored colonial building. We arrived 20 minutes before the agreed time, 10 o'clock in the morning. Robert greeted us in his office, a large room with bookshelves full of legal volumes and an antique mahogany desk. Vanessa confirmed her attendance, he informed us while serving coffee. She'll be coming with Gary Soto, and probably with some cheap lawyer she managed to find. "How solid is our case?" I asked. Robert smiled with that quiet confidence of someone who knows they hold all the winning cards. "Mrs. Miller, our case is not solid. It's bulletproof. We have audio-visual evidence, bank documents, witnesses, and her criminal history. If this goes to trial, they'll destroy her, and she knows it." "Then why did she agree to come?" "Because she still thinks she can negotiate, manipulate, get something out of it. Scammers always think they're smarter than everyone else." At 10 o'clock sharp, the reception doorbell rang. My heart raced. I took a deep breath. Eleanor squeezed my hand. The secretary opened the door to the conference room, a room next to the office, with a long glass table and black leather chairs. And they entered. Vanessa looked different, thinner, dark circles poorly covered with makeup, her hair pulled back in a high ponytail that made her look harder. She was wearing tight jeans and a champagne-coloured silk blouse, probably bought with my money. Next to her walked Gary Soto, a man in his 40s, with a scruffy beard, a wrinkled shirt, and the smile of a used car salesman. And behind them, a short guy in a poorly pressed suit carrying a worn briefcase. The cheap lawyer Robert had predicted. When Vanessa saw me, something crossed her face. Surprise, fear, rage. I couldn't identify it, but she definitely hadn't expected to see me there. "What is she doing here?" she asked in a sharp voice, pointing at me as if I were a cockroach. "It's her house we're talking about," Robert replied calmly. "She has every right to be present." "I thought this was to negotiate the divorce between Daniel and me." "Oh, it is, but it's also to discuss other matters. Please, take a seat." They sat on the other side of the table. Vanessa avoided looking at me. Gary watched me with thinly veiled contempt. The cheap lawyer took out a notepad and a pen. We sat on the opposite side. Robert in the center, Eleanor on his right, me on his left, Daniel next to me, like a tribunal. Robert opened his briefcase and took out a thick folder. He placed it on the table with a dry thud that resonated in the silence. "All right, let's begin. Mrs. Vanessa Salinas de Sanchez, you are here because my client, Mrs. Rose Miller, has several serious accusations against you." The cheap lawyer cleared his throat. "With all due respect, counsel, my client is not obligated to—" "Your client," Robert interrupted him with a voice of steel, "committed fraud, misappropriation, abuse and conspiracy to commit patrimonial fraud. If you don't want to hear what I have to say, you are free to leave. But in that case, we will file criminal charges this afternoon. Do you want to leave? Silence. Good. Let's continue. Robert opened the folder. He took out copies of bank statements and slid them across the table. Between January of 2023 and October of 2025, you and Daniel Sanchez withdrew $520,000 from a bank account belonging to Mrs. Rose Miller. Money that was not yours. That is called theft. Those were household expenses, Vanessa protested, recovering some composure. We paid for everything: electricity, water, gas, food. We had a right. $380,000 on a car? Eleanor asked with a sharp voice. Were those household expenses? Vanessa clenched her jaw. Robert took out another document. Then we have this. False notarial documents attempting to declare Mrs. Miller mentally incompetent. Forged signatures. Fraudulent medical reports. The cheap lawyer turned pale. I would have to verify. We already verified. The doctor who supposedly signed those reports doesn't even exist. It's an invented name. That is falsification of a public document. A serious crime. He slid more papers across the table. Vanessa looked at them as if they were venomous snakes. We also have this. Robert took out a USB drive and plugged it into a laptop. The screen was projected onto the white wall behind us. 27 videos documenting verbal and psychological abuse against my client. Do you want to see some? It's not necessary, the cheap lawyer mumbled. I insist. Robert pressed play. Vanessa's voice filled the room. Who cooks like that? You're completely useless. At your age, you should be grateful that we support you. Video after video, insult after insult, humiliation after humiliation. Vanessa's face got redder with every passing second. Gary shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The cheap lawyer took frantic notes. When it ended, the silence was deafening. Abuse of an elderly person, Robert said, closing the laptop. Another crime. And finally, he took out one last recording, the one of the phone conversation. No, Vanessa whispered. You can't. Oh, yes, I can. He pressed play. Don't be impatient, my love. Everything is almost ready. Daniel tensed up next to me. Although he had already heard the recording, hearing it again out loud seemed to destroy him all over again. The idiot doesn't suspect anything. He thinks I'm doing it for him. Gary sank into his chair, avoiding everyone's gaze. Of course I'm going to leave him, Gary. You think I married that imbecile for love? Please, he was just the means to get the house. When the recording ended, Vanessa was trembling with rage, or with fear, perhaps both. That recording is illegal, she spat. You can't use it in the US. Eleanor interrupted her with a smile. One party can record a conversation without the other's consent if they have grounds to protect themselves from a crime. And my cousin had plenty of grounds. Robert closed the folder. Now, Mrs. Vanessa, let's tally up. We have patrimonial fraud, document forgery, abuse of an elderly person, and conspiracy. If this goes to trial, you are looking at between 5 and 10 years in prison, minimum. The cheap lawyer swallowed. Counsel, perhaps we can reach a settlement. Oh, absolutely, that's why you're here. My client is willing not to press criminal charges if the following conditions are met. He took out a new document. He read it aloud. 1. Immediate return of the Mazda CX-5 vehicle, which will be sold, and the money returned to Mrs. Miller's account. 2. Signing a voluntary divorce without claiming any of Daniel Sanchez's or Rose Miller's assets. 3. A restraining order. You may not approach either of them within 500 yards. 4. Payment of $100,000 for emotional damages. And 5. Immediate abandonment of the Denver metropolitan area. Vanessa exploded. That's ridiculous. I won't accept. The alternative, Robert said in a quiet but lethal voice, is that we submit all of this to the district attorney's office today. We will also consider public exposure, social media, local groups, news outlets. A story about how a woman took advantage of a vulnerable old lady. We've already prepared the press release. All that's left is to hit publish. Vanessa turned pale. In this digital age, public shame could be worse than prison. She looked at Gary for support. He avoided her gaze. The coward. Her voice broke. I don't have $100,000. Then get it, I said, speaking for the first time. All eyes turned to me. Sell whatever you have. Ask your family for it. I don't care, but either you pay me or you go to jail. We looked at each other across the table, predator and prey. But now the roles were reversed. You have until Friday, Robert added, to sign all the documents and hand over the money. Otherwise, we activate the entire legal process. It's not fair, Vanessa cried. I only wanted... What? I asked in a hard voice. To rob me? To take my house? To destroy my family? To humiliate me every day? Which of those things did you only want to do? No, she replied. She just cried, her hands covering her face. But they were tears of rage, not regret. The meeting is over, Robert declared. You have until 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon. After that, there's no going back. They stood up. Vanessa practically ran toward the door, followed by Gary and the useless lawyer. But before leaving, she turned toward me one last time. I won't forget this, she hissed with venom in every word. Someday you'll regret... What? I interrupted her, standing up. Defending myself? Taking back what is mine? No, Vanessa. The one who will regret something is you. You will regret underestimating a useless old lady. She slammed the door shut as she left. When her footsteps faded down the hall, I collapsed into the chair. My legs were trembling. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. Eleanor hugged me. You did it perfectly, cousin. Perfectly. Daniel looked at me with something that could be admiration, or shame, or both. Mom! No, I said, raising my hand. Not yet. First, let this finish. Then we'll talk, you and I. Robert put away the documents with a satisfied smile. Should we bet? Do you think she'll show up on Friday? She'll come, Eleanor said confidently. Cowards always choose the easiest path. And she was right. On Friday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 2 hours before the deadline, Vanessa appeared at Robert's office, alone, without Gary, without a lawyer. She brought the signed documents, a cashier's check for $100,000, and the keys to the Mazda. She didn't say a word. She just put everything on the desk, signed the final divorce papers and the restraining order, and left. I watched her leave from the office window. She walked hunched over, defeated, with a small suitcase dragging behind her. A taxi picked her up on the corner. And just like that, Vanessa Salinas disappeared from our lives. It's over, Eleanor whispered. It's over, I repeated. But something didn't leave me completely at peace. A strange feeling in my stomach, like when you know the storm has passed but the air still smells like rain. And I was right to be suspicious. Because 3 days later, I would discover that Vanessa hadn't been the only viper in my house. There was another, closer, more painful, and its betrayal would hit me in a way I never imagined. 3 days after Vanessa signed the papers, life began to return to a nearly normal rhythm. Nearly. Daniel continued working at the hardware store. He left early, came back tired, ate dinner in silence, and shut himself in his room. We barely spoke. The wound between us still bled, although no longer profusely. Eleanor had stayed 2 weeks longer than planned. "Just to make sure everything is in order," she would say. But I knew the truth. She was afraid to leave me alone still, afraid that I would fall back into that pit of silence and submission. I wasn't going to fall. Never again. It was a Wednesday afternoon. Eleanor had gone to the market to buy ingredients for dinner. Daniel was at work. I was in the living room, sewing a button onto one of my blouses. Those small domestic tasks I used to do automatically, and that now I performed with a strange sense of recovered peace. The doorbell rang. I put the sewing aside and walked to the door. I looked through the peephole. A man I didn't know. Grey suit, navy blue tie, briefcase in hand, professional appearance. I opened the door cautiously, leaving the security chain in place. "Yes? Mrs. Rose Miller? Who is asking?" "My name is Albert Fisher. I'm a public notary." He took out an ID and showed it to me through the crack in the door. "I'm here on behalf of Counsel Robert Martin. I need you to sign some final documents related to your daughter-in-law's case." Something wasn't right. Robert hadn't mentioned anything about additional documents. "Can you wait a moment? I'm going to call Counsel Robert to confirm." The man smiled. "Of course, that's the right thing to do." I closed the door and dialed Robert's number. He answered on the third ring. "Mrs. Miller, is everything okay?" "There's a notary at my door. He says he's from you with documents for me to sign." Silence on the other end of the line, but not normal silence. The silence of alarm. "What's his name?" "Albert Fisher." "Mrs. Miller, I did not send any notary. Do not open that door. Do not sign anything. Do you hear me? Call the police right now." My heart skipped a beat. "What?" "It's a trap. Vanessa is trying something. Lock the door, don't go out, and call 911. I'm on my way." He hung up. With trembling hands, I turned the extra deadbolt on the door. I ran to the living room window and peered out carefully. The notary was no longer alone. There was a car parked in front of my house, a grey Volkswagen Jetta. And inside, in the driver's seat, was Gary, and next to him, Vanessa. I backed away from the window, breathing rapidly. What were they planning? To break in? To steal something? To hurt me? I dialed 911 with shaky fingers. 911, what is your emergency?" "There are suspicious people outside my house. They tried to trick me by posing as a notary. I think they want to get in." I gave my address. The operator told me a patrol car was on the way, but then I heard something that chilled my blood. A key turning in the lock. I froze. How did they have a key to my house? And then I remembered. Vanessa had lived here for 3 years. She had probably made copies. The door opened, or tried to open. The extra deadbolt I had placed stopped the entrance. I heard curses from the other side. "Open the door, you old devil!" Vanessa screamed. "That house is mine. You have papers that belong to me." "You're violating the restraining order," I shouted back. "The police are on their way." "I don't care about the police. You're going to pay for what you did to me." Loud banging on the door. Kicks. They were trying to break it down. I ran to the kitchen. I grabbed my cell phone and started recording. Everything. The screams, the bangs, the evidence. "Gary, ram the door," Vanessa ordered like a maniac. More banging. The wood groaned. The frame splintered. Then I heard sirens. The patrol cars arrived, just as the fake notary managed to force the lock. The door burst open, and there they were, all three of them, frozen in the doorway, with 4 police officers pointing their weapons at them. "Hands up! Now!" Gary immediately raised his hands, a coward until the end. The fake notary tried to run, but a police officer stopped him. Vanessa stood there, with pure hatred in her eyes, looking at me. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Ma'am, step back," a female officer, stocky in her 40s, ordered. "You are violating a restraining order." "That house is mine. That old woman stole it from me." "The house has been in Rose Miller's name since 1993, another officer said, consulting his handheld computer. "You have no right to this property." They handcuffed all 3 of them. Vanessa screamed, kicked, hurled insults that would make a sailor blush. Gary went silently, his head bowed. The fake notary tried to negotiate. "Officer, this is a misunderstanding. You impersonated a public official. That is a federal offense." I continued recording everything, every second, every word. When they put them in the patrol cars, Vanessa looked at me one last time through the window. "I hope you die alone and forgotten, you damn old hag." The patrol cars drove away with the sirens wailing. I collapsed onto the living room sofa, trembling from head to toe. My cell phone almost slipped from my hands. 10 minutes later, Robert arrived, disheveled and without his tie, as if he had run from his office. "Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" I'm fine. Just scared." "This is extremely serious. Violation of a restraining order, breaking and entering, impersonation of identity. Vanessa is not getting out of this." "What happens now?" "Now she goes to prison, and not for a few months, for years." Eleanor arrived shortly after, carrying grocery bags and looking distraught. "Lucy called me. What happened?" I told her everything. My cousin hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "It's over, Rose. Truly over this time. That woman will never bother you again." That night, Daniel came home from work and found the door splintered and a house full of police officers taking statements. When I explained what had happened, he turned pale. "Mum, if something had happened to you, if you hadn't closed the extra deadbolt—" "But I did. I've learned to protect myself, son. That's something I should have done 3 years ago." In the following weeks, the legal process moved quickly. Vanessa Salinas was formally charged with patrimonial fraud, document forgery, abuse of an elderly person, violation of a restraining order, and breaking and entering. Gary Soto as an accomplice, the fake notary for impersonation of identity. All 3 were sentenced. Vanessa, 7 years in prison. Gary, 5 years. The fake notary, 3 years. The day of the sentencing, I was in the courtroom, with Eleanor by my side, with Robert representing me, and with Daniel, my son, who finally was on the right side. When the judge read the sentence, Vanessa looked at me from the defendant's bench. Nothing was left of that confident, manipulative woman who had entered my house 3 years ago. There was only a defeated criminal in an orange jumpsuit. I didn't feel joy, not even complete satisfaction. Only relief. Deep. Absolute. We left the courthouse under a clear sky. Eleanor took my arm. "How do you feel?" "Like I can finally breathe." Daniel walked behind us, quiet. I waited for him. We stopped on the sidewalk. "Mum, I can never apologize enough for—" "I know," I interrupted him. "And you're right. It's never going to be enough. But Daniel, look at me." He looked up. There were tears in his eyes. You made terrible mistakes. You failed me when I needed you most. But these last few months, you've tried to fix it, little by little. And that counts. It doesn't erase the past, but it counts. Does that mean that? It means I'm willing to try, to rebuild what was broken between us. It won't be fast. It won't be easy. But I'm willing if you are too. He broke down. He hugged me there on the sidewalk, sobbing like a small child. I am, Mum. I swear it. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. I don't need you to spend your life making it up to me, I said, stroking his hair that was already starting to grey. I just need you to be a good son from now on, to respect me, to value me, to remember that this relationship is a two-way street. I will. I promise you. And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. That night, back home, my house, recovered, free of vipers, Eleanor prepared a special dinner: turkey pot pie, fresh rolls, mashed potatoes, and sweet potato casserole. The three of us sat at the dining table, and for the first time in 3 years, a dinner in that house wasn't loaded with tension or fear. There was laughter, shared memories, future plans. After dinner, I went up to my bedroom, my real bedroom, not the service room, and sat on the bed Harold had built. I took his photograph out of the drawer. I did it, my love, I whispered. I got our house back. I got our dignity back. And I'm getting our son back. I could almost hear his voice answering. I always knew you were stronger than you thought, Rose. I put the photo away carefully and turned off the light. Outside, the city of Denver slept peacefully. Inside, in this house whose walls had seen so much pain, there was finally peace. But this story wasn't over yet, because the most important chapter was missing. The one about rebuilding, the one about forgiveness, the one about turning the ashes into something new and beautiful. And that chapter was just beginning. The house smelled of fresh coffee and warm biscuits. The windows were open, letting in the cool breeze of an April morning in Denver. In the living room, Harold's photographs smiled again from their frames on the wall. The porcelain china, or what was left of it after my outburst of rage, rested in its display cabinet, with the broken pieces repaired using the Japanese technique of kintsugi, joining the fragments with golden resin that made the cracks visible but beautiful, like scars that tell stories of survival. I was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of vegetable soup. But this time, no one would snatch the pot from my hands. This time, I was cooking because I wanted to, because it was my kitchen, my house, my recovered life. Mrs. Miller, Lucy's voice, my neighbour, came from the front door. I'm here. Where do you want me to put the boxes? In the living room, sweetie. Thank you. Lucy came in carrying cardboard boxes full of blankets, pillows, and toiletries. Behind her came Eleanor, who had decided to move in permanently with me, with more bags. Because the house was no longer just my refuge. It had become a refuge for others. 3 months earlier, while drinking coffee with Eleanor in the living room, I had an epiphany. I looked at the empty rooms, now that Daniel had moved into his own apartment, working hard to pay back every dollar he owed me. And I thought of all the women who were probably going through what I had gone through. Elderly women being dispossessed by their own families, abused, ignored, erased from their own lives. Cousin, I said to Eleanor, how would you feel about turning this house into something more? And so, Harold's house was born. A temporary shelter for elderly women in situations of family or financial abuse. A place where they could stay while they resolved their legal issues, recovered their strength, rebuilt their lives. It wasn't a nursing home. It wasn't charity. It was a home. Eleanor used her contacts to secure free legal support for the women who arrived. Robert Martin offered his services pro bono 2 days a week. Lucy, who had become like a granddaughter to me, helped with social media and outreach. And I cooked. I listened. I shared my story. I showed them it was possible to get up after the hardest fall. In 6 months, we had helped 14 women, 14 stories of pain that turned into stories of resilience. That morning, we were expecting number 15. Her name was Stella, 72 years old. Her son and daughter-in-law had left her on the street after selling their house, which was actually Stella's, and keeping the money. Robert was handling her case. The doorbell rang at 10 o'clock sharp. I opened the door. There she was, a stooped woman, in a sweater too big for her, a small patched suitcase, and eyes that had cried so much they looked dry. "Mrs. Stella?" She nodded without speaking. "Please come in. This is your home now." Her eyes filled with tears. "Really?" I led her inside. I showed her her room, clean, with windows that looked out onto the rose garden I had replanted, with fresh sheets and a knit blanket. Nothing luxurious, but dignified, cozy. "This is for me. For you. For as long as you need." She sat on the bed and finally cried. She cried as I had cried so many times. She cried with that deep sob of someone who has carried pain for too long. I sat beside her and took her wrinkled hand, so similar to mine. "I went through this too," I told her gently. "I also thought there was no way out, that I was too old, too weak, too useless. But I wasn't, and neither are you. But my son? I know. It hurts more when it's your own flesh and blood. But Stella, listen closely. You are worth more than they made you believe, and you are not alone. Not anymore." That afternoon, we organized a meeting in the living room. The 5 women currently living at Harold's house sat in a circle. Stella, still shy, joined them. One by one, they shared their stories. Sharon, 66 years old, dispossessed of her sewing workshop by her daughter. Brenda, 70 years old, abused by her son-in-law, who blamed her for all the marriage problems. Celia, 63, whose drug-addicted son stole her pension month after month. Different stories, but the same pain, the same betrayal, the same feeling of being invisible. "And what did you do?" Stella asked with a trembling voice. "We fought back," Sharon replied proudly. "With Council Robert's help, I got my workshop back, and now my daughter doesn't even dare approach me." "I got a restraining order against my son-in-law," Brenda added. "My daughter had to choose. She chose her husband. It hurts, I won't lie, but at least now I have peace." "And I," Celia said with a tired smile, "put my son in rehab, by force. It was the hardest thing I ever did in my life, but if I hadn't done it, I would be dead, or he would be." Stella looked at them with something that was beginning to resemble hope. "Do you really think I can too?" "We don't think so," I said firmly. "We know so, because we lived it, and because we are here to help you." The months that followed were filled with healing, not only for the women who passed through Harold's house, but for me too. Every story I heard, every legal victory we celebrated, every time I saw a woman reclaim her dignity, was like healing a part of my own wound. Daniel came to visit every Sunday. He brought flowers. Sometimes he helped with repairs around the house. He had learned basic carpentry on YouTube. Little by little, conversation after conversation, the gap between us narrowed. One afternoon, while he was fixing a backyard door, he stopped and looked at me. "Mum, do you think you'll ever be able to completely forgive me?" I thought about it before answering. "I don't know, Daniel. There are things you don't forget. But I paused, choosing my words carefully. I'm learning that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means deciding not to let the past control your present. And does your present include having me in your life? Yes, I said after a moment. But on different terms. I'm no longer the mother who lets herself be trampled on for fear of losing her son. Now I'm the mother who respects herself. And if you want to be in my life, you have to respect that. I do. I respect it. And I admire you, Mum. What you did, what you're doing with this house, is incredible. I felt something warm in my chest. It wasn't the blind, unconditional love from before. It was something more mature, more real. Thank you, son. 1 year after Vanessa was sentenced, Harold's house had become a reference in Denver. Articles in the local newspaper, an interview on state radio, donations from the community, more volunteer lawyers. We had helped 37 women, 37 lives recovered, and each of them reminded me why it had been worth fighting, why it had been worth breaking those porcelain plates in a desperate outburst of rage, why it had been worth recording every insult, every humiliation, every moment of pain. Because from the deepest pain, the greatest strength can be born. One afternoon in December, just before Christmas, I was in the garden watering the roses when Eleanor came out with the phone in her hand. "Cousin, you have to hear this." It was a voicemail. From a young woman, her voice broken by crying. "Mrs. Miller, you don't know me. My name is Patricia. I saw your interview on the radio. My grandmother is going through something similar to what you went through. Her own children are dispossessing her of her house. I don't know what to do. I don't have money for lawyers. But when I heard you speak, I thought maybe you could help us, or at least tell us how to start. Please. My grandmother is 74 years old and is losing faith in everything. But your story gave her hope. And me too." I stood there, the hose dripping in my hands and tears streaming down my cheeks. "Are you going to call her?" Eleanor asked. "Of course I'm going to call her. And I'm going to help her, like someone should have helped me when I needed it most." That Christmas was different from all the others. We decorated Harold's house with coloured lights, a tree in the living room, and garlands in every window. The 6 women who lived with us helped with dinner: sweet and savoury tamales, fruit punch, roasted turkey, apple salad. Daniel came with his new girlfriend, a genuine, hard-working woman who treated me with respect from the first moment. Lucy brought her family. Robert stopped by with his wife and children. The house, that house that had seen so much pain, so much abuse, so much darkness, now overflowed with laughter, hugs, and light. After dinner, when everyone was talking in the living room, I went up to my bedroom. I took out Harold's photograph. I held it against my chest. "Look what we did, my love," I whispered. "This house we built together is now saving lives. I wish you could see it." I could almost feel his smile, his pride, his love that never truly left. I walked down the stairs. On the landing, I stopped to look at the scene in the living room. Women of all ages laughing together, sharing stories, finding family in unexpected places. And I realized something. I had lost a lot. 3 years of my life. $520,000. The innocence of blindly believing in family. Part of the relationship with my son. But I had also gained. I had gained strength I didn't know I had. Purpose I never imagined. A chosen family, not of blood, but of spirit. And above all, I had recovered myself. The Rose that existed before fear and loneliness convinced me to accept scraps when I deserved a full banquet. I stepped down the last stair and entered the living room. All eyes turned to me. "A toast?" Eleanor suggested, raising her cup of punch. "Yes," I said, taking mine. "I want to say something." The room fell silent. "This year, I learned something I want to share with all of you," I began, looking especially at the women of Harold's house. "I learned that it's never, ever too late to stand up for yourself. That age isn't a weakness, it's experience. That family love doesn't mean letting yourself be destroyed. And that when you hit rock bottom, when you think you can't go on, that's when you truly discover what you're made of." Sharon wiped away a tear. Brenda nodded vigorously. Stella, who had been with us for 3 months and whose case was progressing well, smiled for the first time since she arrived. "If there's anyone listening to this who is going through something similar," I continued, "I want you to know this. You are worthy. Your lives matter. Your dignity is non-negotiable. And you are never, ever alone. There are always hands willing to help. You just have to dare to ask for it." "Cheers!" Eleanor shouted. "Cheers!" we all responded. The sound of glasses clinking filled the room, and in that moment, looking at all those women who had found strength in their scars, I knew I had found my true purpose. It wasn't just to live, it was to live with dignity, with strength, with the certainty that I deserved respect, and to help others discover the same thing. That night, when everyone left and the house fell silent again, I sat on the back porch. The stars shone over Denver. The air smelled of damp earth and roses, and for the first time in years, perhaps decades, I felt completely at peace. Because I had learned the most important lesson. The true wealth is not in what you possess. It is in what you do not allow them to take from you. Your dignity, your worth, your voice. And those things, once you recover them, no one, absolutely no one, can take them away from you again. If this story reached your heart, if it touched something inside you, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Did you go through something similar? Do you know someone who needs to hear this? Because these stories are not just entertainment. They are reminders that we can rise up, that we deserve respect, that it is never too late to take back what is ours. And if today someone is making you feel small, invisible, useless, remember Rose. Remember that a 69-year-old woman shattered an empire of lies with nothing more than courage and determination. If she could do it, you can too. Give this video a like if it inspired you. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of women who refused to surrender, and share this with someone who needs to remember their own power. Because dignity has no age, and true strength doesn't shout. It simply rises and never kneels again.